Welcome. This session is getting started with WebRTC. So we've already heard here at AstriCon a lot about WebRTC in the keynote panel. There are several sessions in WebRTC. And when I was speaking with David Duffett, he said what we really need is an intro to WebRTC session. And so today's session, we're doing an intro to WebRTC. If you are just kind of want to learn what are the basics, what's the language and terminology, what are the things I need to understand about WebRTC in order to understand even some of the other talks that are here at the show, you guys are in the right place. So my name is Billy Chia. I call myself these days a full stack marketer for Respoke. So it's kind of like if you're a full stack developer, well, I'm kind of like a full stack marketer. You guys can hit me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, GitHub, and those kind of places. And you know, I do marketing and hacking and some things like that for Respoke, which is a WebRTC platform where we use WebRTC. So that's kind of my credentials for being able to talk about WebRTC. I also do some blogging, and I'll show some of that to you guys as well. So really today, we just kind of want to answer some of these questions here. We want to ask, hey, how popular is WebRTC? What is WebRTC? How does WebRTC work? We'll answer that today. Where? So what are the types of technologies and what browsers support it, what don't? We'll answer those types of questions today. And then really, there's a lot of buzz around WebRTC, and some of it is justified and some of it is misdirected. But we'll really ask, why is there so much buzz around WebRTC? What's the big deal with it? And of course, do a little demo and maybe an early preview of the dangerous demos tomorrow. Let's see how many people in this room we can get to do the demo. We'll try it out. I'm not sure. So first of all, that's a little bit about me. Now I'd like to know a little bit about you. How many in the room just would say, hey, I know something about WebRTC? Just something. Okay, probably most of us. How many would say, I am well acquainted with WebRTC? Okay, just a few. Would anyone say, I am a WebRTC expert? Lantry, of course, is a WebRTC expert, and you should come to his WebRTC talk, which is tomorrow. So go check out his talk. He is a WebRTC expert. So the popularity of WebRTC, you can see everyone in the room has probably heard a little bit about it. We do have a few experts. It is kind of a new technology, but it is actually growing rapidly in popularity. And this graph here is from a blog post I just put out on No Jitter. So I'll show you guys to this post here to show some of the other charts. But what I did for this post was I went to Stack Overflow, which is a developer question and answer site, and I queried via their API how many people post questions with the WebRTC tag to track that over time. And what you can see is that it actually is ranked in the top 6th percentile across the entire website for total number of tags, which is very popular. And when you compare it with other web technologies, so things like WebGL or WebSocket, here you can see the WebSocket growth trend, but WebSocket has actually been around for longer. So when you look at the WebRTC growth trend, it's following those same types of patterns as those other web technologies. And so based on the data here, we can feel with a reasonable amount of confidence that the growth trend will continue. And so of course, this is just kind of one data point saying how much are developers, because this really is a developer technology, how much are developers talking about and using WebRTC? It's quite a bit, and it's trending. So that's a lot of excitement there. So really, what is WebRTC? It stands for Web Real-Time Communications. That's really all that it is real-time communications on the web. So this is audio, video, and data. Data features, things like screen sharing, messaging. I say text messaging, but not necessarily SMS, more like chat messages, right? Those types of features built into the browser. So web apps and even mobile apps, that type of communications is what WebRTC as a technology is enabling. So here we are at AstriCon, and we are probably familiar with this type of model, Asterisk as a back-to-back user agent. And so here you would have phone A talking to phone B, and they would do so through Asterisk, through an intermediary or a server, right? And Asterisk actually stays in that media path between those two phones. Well, with WebRTC, it's the web. So it's a browser-based technology. So what you have is you have a web browser talking to another web browser. I'm actually doing communications in my web browser, and we'll actually try it out together. If you have your laptop here, we'll do a little demo app towards the end. But the cool thing about WebRTC is that it is peer-to-peer. So those of you that are very familiar with SIP phones, you actually know that a SIP device can be peer-to-peer. The phones can just talk directly without any server in the middle. And this is how WebRTC works. Because it's peer-to-peer, it is my browser talking directly to your browser with nothing in the middle, right? That's a very new kind of paradigm. This has all kinds of advantages to it. Because it's peer-to-peer, it has very low latency. So of course, the more stuff you stick in the middle, you're increasing the amount of time it takes to go through all of those hops. But if you just go straight from one point to another, and that's peer-to-peer, it's very low latency, and you get a high-quality stream. So that is the exciting thing, one of the exciting things about how WebRTC works. Now, of course, you may be asking yourself the question, well, if Asterisk talks to phones and WebRTC talks to browsers, well, can I do this? Can I have a call in a web browser go to a phone? And the answer is yes. There are actually two different ways to do this in Asterisk. So Asterisk is actually, the Asterisk community and Digium have been early adopters of WebRTC. And very early, even as early as Asterisk 11, there was a WebRTC functionality with WebSockets and iStun and Turn, those types of transports. Technologies were in Asterisk, and so you can actually connect a WebRTC channel over using some type of SIP package. There are several available, or you could write your own, but you can connect a web browser to a phone. And additionally, what we just released this past weekend is in the very nascent, very new code is Chan Respoke. And so you can actually do a WebRTC call using Respoke and bridge that into Asterisk in order to call a phone, doing so using Chan Respoke. And so we actually had two different teams in the hackathon yesterday use Chan Respoke. One of them did so successfully. One of them found some bugs. And so you can thank them if you want to use it because we're fixing stuff. And like I said, that's very new code. So if you're adventurous, check out Chan Respoke. We're excited about that. One thing I do like to point out is that WebRTC is a technology. It's not a product. And so when I say, some of the hype is justified, some of the hype is overplayed, it's really unjustified, the reason is just this misunderstanding that WebRTC is a product, something that like I buy like everything else, right? So if I say I can do this with WebRTC or do that with WebRTC, the idea is you can, but only once it's inside a product, right? So we can make a video call in the browser, but in order for that to happen, you actually have to write some code, right? So WebRTC is a developer tool. It's literally browser APIs, right? So these are the APIs, and if you're a JavaScript developer, actually let me ask that question. How many folks in the room are JavaScript developers? Can write a little bit of JavaScript. So we do have some devs in the room, and that's exciting. So the idea is if you're a JavaScript developer and you want to do communications, in the past, you had to know everything about telephony, and there was a lot to learn. I wouldn't say everything, but there was a lot to learn. With WebRTC, you get these browser APIs that as a JavaScript developer just allows you to access this right in the browser. So there are three main APIs. One's called Get User Media. So in your code, you actually call this API, this kind of object, and it allows you to basically access the microphone and the camera and the screen. So that API, I'm a JavaScript developer, I'm writing a web application, and I call this API to allow me to get access to those things, right? Then I can do a peer connection, and that's what actually can connect 2 points together. And then there's an API called Data Channel. And Data Channel is very exciting because, it allows you to do a peer-to-peer, browser-to-browser data connection, right? So imagine I'm a web programmer, I'm building some type of, let's say, video game, and you and I are playing this game together, and all of a sudden you've done a Zerg rush on me, right? How many folks know what a Zerg rush is? Google Zerg rush and you'll find out. So, you're doing a Zerg rush on me, so you have like 1,000 enemies. You're like 1,000 barbarians are coming to battle like my 5 Valkyries, right? And all of your barbarians are all, in different locations. And in order to update your state, in order to update the data from your game onto my game so that we can play it together, you have to send all that data, right? Well, if we have a peer-to-peer open connection over a data channel, that type of data, sending that type of data becomes very easy to update. And so you have these low latency connections that allow you to do exciting things with data. And there's all kinds of possibilities opened up with the data channel there. There's a project called Peer CDN that was a peer-to-peer based content delivery network. They're actually recently acquired by Yahoo, and they did that using WebRTC in the data channel. So when people say, what is WebRTC? It's not a product, it's these APIs. This is what the developer's using to do WebRTC. Another thing that you're gonna wanna understand, part of the language as you're going to the talks, you're going to hear people talk about ice, stun, and turn. So the idea here is if you are a developer, these are things that then you need to do extra things to take care of. Like WebRTC it does some of it, but it doesn't. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So first, let's talk about stun. So stun, and actually just from being in the voice over IP world, being here at a predominantly voice over IP conference here with Asterisk, stun is a technology that's used there. And what stun basically says is when there are network conditions that are suboptimal, right? So let's say I'm over here and I'm trying to talk to you on the phone, and I'm behind a NAT. So like I'm in my hotel room, and the hotel is doing network address translation. So I have a different IP address than what's being shown publicly. And then similarly, maybe you're on your home network, so you're on a private address. So if you remember, WebRTC is peer-to-peer. So if I want from my browser to send directly to your browser a message, I can't, right? Because this has a private IP and this has a private IP and there's not a routable path. Well, what stun does is stun is a technology that kind of helps to sort that out. It says, hey, what's the public IP that actually gets to this endpoint? What's the public IP that actually gets to this endpoint? And stun basically says, hey, show these public IP addresses so that we can have a media path, so that we can go peer-to-peer, but we know the route to get there through our IP addresses, right? But in some cases, stun still can't figure it out, right? And anywhere from around 15% of the time, maybe 10%, maybe 20%, but around 15% of the time, even with stun, you still cannot get a peer-to-peer path. So there is a technology called turn, and it's a transversal using relays for NAT, I think around NAT is what a turn stand for. And so just kind of like the relay race, they hand off the baton. What turn is a server, typically out in the cloud there somewhere, right? And the turn server actually proxies that media. So instead of a peer-to-peer path going straight between the browsers, in 15% of the cases, you just cannot avoid going through another server. And so that turn server actually, instead of sending from your browser, sending your media straight to my browser, your browser sends its media, and when I say media, the voice, the actual video, right? It sends the voice up to that turn server, and the turn server proxies that voice and video and sends it to me. And that way we can actually still even have a network call, even if there's all kinds of 12 different NATs in between us and all kinds of crazy network conditions. WebRTC has a means of figuring that out. Now, of course, you're thinking, okay, well, I'm a JavaScript developer. I'm developing my web app, but now I need to have servers in the cloud. That's something I need to do, and that is true. This is why we have products like Respoke. So what Respoke does, it actually handles all that turn infrastructure for you. Respoke has like a cloud platform, and there are other services perhaps like Respoke, but when you use Respoke, Respoke just handles all of that turn infrastructure for you, all of that cloud infrastructure, so that you as a developer or your developer team can just write their code and they don't have to worry about that. And then WebRTC and Respoke using WebRTC will make use of these technologies, stun and turn. And the last one, of course, is ICE. Yeah, this is the rapper Ice Cube, and there's a very good movie. I say very good. There's a movie that I enjoy that is called Boys in the Hood. Anybody seen Boys in the Hood? We have a few fans that are in the know of the awesomeness. That's such a great movie. I forgot I was just talking about Ice Cube. Okay, ICE. ICE is basically, in a nutshell, ICE is the technology that figures out the stun and turn. So ICE says, okay, hey, we need to figure out our network if we want to talk to each other. So hey, let's try stun first. Is stun working out? Stun is not working. Let's go ahead and use a relay server. Let's go ahead and use turn. And so ICE is that technology that does that. So altogether, the ICE, stun, and turn, when you guys are kind of hearing that language, that just basically means, hey, we're going to work it out irrespective of the difficulties in the network path, right? Okay. The last thing I want to mention, especially from a developer point of view, if you're developing a WebRTC or especially if you're developing on the native APIs, is that WebRTC does not include a signaling protocol, right? And so a signaling protocol is basically, we want to do a call, and WebRTC has all of these mechanisms to allow us to do a peer-to-peer video call or audio call or even share data, but something has to set that up, right? I have to say, hey, let's do a call, Mikey, or hey, let's do a call, and then you have to say, oh, okay, I acknowledge that. Let's do this call. We have to have an interchange, and they call that signaling. So when you hear people talk about WebRTC signaling, all they mean is that we need some type of means to establish that call, to say, hey, you want to do a call? Oh, yeah, I'll do a call. How do you want to, what's the parameters of it? Those sorts of things. And in WebRTC, you can actually use any kind of signaling you want. So you can take SIP, which SIP is kind of like its own signaling stack, and you can use SIP for WebRTC. You can take XMPP. You could use XMPP as WebRTC signaling. You can actually even write your own signaling, which is actually what Bespoke does. We just have our own custom signaling so that we can do it as flexible. And that's why the IETF and the developers of WebRTC, they left the signaling out because they wanted it to be web flexible and web scale. And so they didn't want to dictate what the signaling was. So that's a bonus because it means you can do flexible things. But if you're a developer developing on the native APIs, it's something else that you need to worry about. Unless, of course, you use Bespoke, which is, yeah, I love it, right? I'm wearing the t-shirt. So where does WebRTC work? WebRTC technically, where does it technically work? So if you're using Chrome, the Chrome browser, you're great. If you're using Firefox, hey, awesome, and Opera as well. If you're using Internet Explorer or Safari, nope. And Android or iOS, it's super complicated. I would take like another 45-minute talk just to tell you how it works on mobile because it's very complicated. But that's kind of technically, right? So this is kind of what Craig Walker was mentioning in the keynote this morning. He's basically saying we're in the early phases, or kind of like you saw that growth chart. We're only like halfway through the growth chart of like some of those other technologies with WebRTC. So as we get going, we're going to keep getting better. It's kind of like when they first got the telephone and they said, hey, you can't really use this thing. But of course, as we all know, it ended up being all right. So same thing with WebRTC. As we keep moving forward, it's going to get more adoption. Here's the chart that I found at the iswebrtcreadyyet.com. It kind of shows a little bit of what's coming down the road. So Canary is like the dev channel for Chrome and Firefox Nightly. That's where features get added first, and then they get ported into the main branch. And you guys can find this at iswebrtcreadyyet.com. It kind of talks about the different APIs and parts of WebRTC and where they're implemented. And also ORTC, the ORTC API is kind of a tangential, or it's kind of related to WebRTC. They do some things that are in similarity, but that's even newer and it's being developed, and it's something that Internet Explorer has started to latch on. And so that's actually an encouraging thing because with Internet Explorer starting to implement ORTC, it means that there is a possibility as we kind of move forward for some interoperability there where you could have an application that works both on Chrome and on Internet Explorer. So we're moving forward in terms of adoption. That's getting very excited. The reality is where does WebRTC actually work? And the answer is almost everywhere. I mean, if you're using a platform like Bespoke or any number of other kind of platforms that kind of abstract away from you the complexities, there are things that you can do to make your app work in other places. So for example, there are plugins for Internet Explorer. There are mobile SDKs. So what you can do is if you're building a mobile app, you can just build your native mobile app. If it's Android, you can build a native Java app. If it's iOS, you can do Swift or Objective-C or whatever you're developing. And you can just use the SDK. And the SDK will wrap up for you all of that WebRTC functionality so that your app on your mobile app works the same as the app on your web app, and you're good to go. So smart people are doing lots of cool things to make this work, and we're moving forward there. So why is it that WebRTC is such a big deal? Well, I just came up with a few reasons here. This is certainly not a comprehensive list, but I just think because it's free and open source, quality communications, changes how the web works, number of web devs, number of endpoints, and something I like to call communications as a feature, or actually several folks have coined that term. But when we look at WebRTC, of course, WebRTC is free and open source, and here at AstriCon, we love free and open source. And as we know, just like with Asterisk, where Asterisk has become this amazing powerhouse because of the low barrier to entry, similarly with the WebRTC APIs. It's free, there's no licensing, you don't have to pay to use those kind of APIs. So it basically lowers the cost, especially for services like Bespoke. The cost becomes very low because we're developing them on a free and open source technologies like WebRTC. So it also just helps to speed the development with open source. As we know, in the open source world, when you get communities around things, you can move very rapidly. So that is terrific. Additionally, what makes WebRTC such a big deal, I've already alluded to a little bit, it's the idea that the communications are very high quality, right? So, for example, there are audio codecs. WebRTC supports several different audio codecs, but one in particular is the Opus codec. And the Opus codec is very, very high quality. What it does is it scales for the situation. So you can even play like music over the Opus codec, and it has a wide frequency range. So it's beautiful sound. The video as well, there are great video codecs. There's some debate about which will be like the one codec to rule them all. They haven't figured that out yet, but the reality is that WebRTC codecs like V8 and V9, H.264, H.265, these are very high quality video codecs. So when you actually do a video call on WebRTC, it's a very high quality video call. So the quality of the communications is something that's nice. And then additionally, like I said, because it goes peer-to-peer, you get that low latency. It's very nice because, I mean, you guys have experienced a high latency call when you say like, hey, Mom, how's it going? What? I can't hear you. It's just like so awkward, right? If you have like, this kind of high latency, but with low latency, it becomes very real time and high quality. So the other thing, as I've talked about, changes how the web works. Because WebRTC is peer-to-peer, this is just paradigm shifting. As a web developer, when you're looking at building web apps, traditionally you've always just thought of, okay, I have a server serving this app, and it's a server-centric model of thinking about the world. And really, before WebRTC came around and before the data channel came around, you didn't necessarily have a mechanism where I can say, I can go talk from my browser directly to your browser. That's like a paradigm shift in web development itself. So this is a game-changing and paradigm shifting and disrupting and other buzzwords kind of thing, but that's like legit, right? This is like, those are warranted in this case because it is different than it has been done, and that makes it exciting. So speaking of web development, this will kind of maybe you can wrap your mind around it. If you think of the barrier to entry today to building communication solutions, if you need to understand a technology like SIP, and I just did a little search on LinkedIn. So I just searched on LinkedIn. I said, how many developers have like SIP on their LinkedIn profile? And there was about 250,000, right? But how many LinkedIn profiles have JavaScript as a skill on LinkedIn? Well, it's almost an order of magnitude higher, right? It's 2.2 million. So if you think of, okay, over here I've got 200,000 developers, and over here I've got 2 million developers, you see that the world of communications has now just been, radically, exponentially increased. right? So there's all of these developers now that can get access to this technology and start building interesting and innovative things. So that is one of the things that makes WebRTC a big deal, and it's true. Additionally, just the number of endpoints, in fact, we're almost in like a post-endpoint world, where previously you might ask a question like, well, how many deployed endpoints? But with WebRTC, it almost doesn't matter because everything, all the browsers, all the mobile phones, they all become endpoints. You know? So there's over 1 million today just endpoints, browsers, and technology and you know, devices that support WebRTC today. There's over 1 billion. So just the ability to communicate and the interoperability there is huge. And then the real thing, the one that I'm just very passionate about, and this is a shift in market, right, is communications as a feature. And so the idea is, in the past, when you thought about communications, you typically thought of communications as some type of discrete thing, right? So I'm going to go and buy a phone system, right? Although we're our mindset's a little bit out of that because I no longer buy a box. Now it's just in the cloud, right? I just get Switchbox Cloud. You're not supposed to like plug all your products, right? Switchbox Cloud, we love Switchbox Cloud. Sorry, that's my like commercialism for the day. In any case, you know, today we're kind of thinking more like cloud services and those kind of things. But the idea is, you know, in the past, communications was a singular thing, right? Here's my PBX, and it's a box, and you say, what does the box do? Well, the box does communications, and that's it. But in the new paradigm, when you say, well, what does communications? The answer is everything. The answer is everything does communications. So instead of communications being just this one thing by itself, the answer is communications becomes a feature of all the products and the services, or of all the applications, right? So the idea is if I'm building a game, right? Let's say I'm building a game, as I talked about earlier, and there's more than one person playing that game together. Well, do they need a way to talk to each other? Would it be good to have a little video chat or audio channel to talk while we're playing the game? Hey, WebRTC, right? Or imagine an application like a real estate app, right? The purpose of that app is not to do a phone call. The purpose of the app is for you to explore low-cost homes in your local region or wherever you're moving to, right? But while you're browsing those homes, wouldn't it be nice to just click on that and have a little bit of presence monitoring where it says, hey, the agent for this home is available now, and you could just start a call with them. And the call is contextualized, right? So when the agent picks up the phone and they say, oh, I see that you're looking at, 1000 Dockside Drive. And how do they know that? Because it came through the web tied to that context, right? It's totally different than me looking at a list of homes and it says, call this number, and I call the number, and the agent says, oh, hello, what can I help you with? Please explain to me everything you've been looking at for the last half hour because I don't have vision into that, right? Whereas in the world of web communications, you can take all of that context in the browser, you can see what web page did they call from, even what their web history was, and take all that context with you and put it into that communications channel so that when the person on the other end can see where that call is coming from, that context is part of it. And so the idea is things like real estate apps, things like games, things like any type of shopping apps or whatever, all of those types of applications just become communications enabled. All of them can have audio calls. All of them can do video calls. All of them can do chat. In the new world of WebRTC, that's the type of potential that it exposes. And that's what makes me very excited about what we call the web communications revolution. So as I say, demo or it didn't happen. I know that some of you guys got on Twitter and you saw the cat, which apparently needs to move over a little bit. Okay, and so this is kind of like an app that I built. And if you want to talk about is it easy to build on Respoke, I actually built this app. I'm not really a developer. I'm like the marketing guy. So if the marketing guy can build the app, hey, it must be easy to do. So I'm just going to plug into here my Twitter handle. And hopefully Kyle has also plugged in his Twitter handle, and he has. So Kyle is Respoke's developer evangelist. He's just joined our team. and his Twitter handle is GeekOnNomad. So I'm going to make a call, and this is kind of how WebRTC works here, right? So what happens is first it says, hey, can I access the camera, right? Because you wouldn't just want some website randomly just turning your camera on, right? That would be bad. So it's going to ask my permission, hey, can I turn on the camera? I'm going to say, oh, yes, I will allow. So then I'll get a feed of myself, and you guys in a moment can see Kyle. So there is the demo, and of course what I can do is I can send out a Twitter message here, and I can say, you know, Billy Chia was in a call with GeekOnNomad using Bespoke at AstriCon. I will tweet that out. Now, let's see who else in the room wants to talk to me. What you guys can do is if you go to this website, I'll put it up on the screen, bit.ly/WebRTC1023. So let's just see if I can get some other calls going. And of course, you need to be doing this in a Chrome or a Firefox web browser. But if somebody in the room goes to bit.ly, or I'd encourage many people in the room to go to bit.ly/WebRTC1023. 1023 is simply today's date. That's how I chose that. And so if you go to bit.ly WebRTC1023, it should take you to the app page. And let me refresh mine here. And so it'll redirect you here to Bespoke Video at Heroku app. And you can plug in. If you don't have a Twitter handle, you can simply just type in your name there. And so it looks like Black Spot Media joined the call. So I can go here, and let's see if I can do another call. I will allow. And let's see if we have several other folks. Can you accept on your end? Look at that, even on mobile. And so that's cool. And it looks like we have some other calls coming in. Let me tweet this one out. Let me see if I can. Now you guys are seeing maybe some of the bugs in my software. Who else can I talk to? Let's try this one. See if I can get another call going in here. Maybe not. I've now overloaded the code. So what you guys can even try is go to the drop-down list and see if you can call somebody else in the room. And you guys are welcome to try that out. And so then that way, hey, all right, man, I need to tie it like that because that is awesome. So very cool. You guys can kind of call each other, and then you can click on the tweet and say, hey, I was in a video call. And of course, you can see as more people join, or the more calls you do, you see the bugs now emerging of my software. So if you would please, all those 6 or 7 JavaScript developers, please do go to my GitHub, and you can actually fork the repo. It's github.com/BillyChia, and this one's called Bespoke Video. So maybe you can send a little pull request to fix the Twitter bug there. That was, you know, you can kind of see as they're kind of stacking up here, all these tweet from AstriCon links. There we go. There's another one that I can tweet out. So that's a little app. You guys can play with it. I'll leave that up. It's on Heroku, and you guys can just make a video call. And you can see it's very simple. And you can even go to GitHub, and you can look at the code. I'll show you guys the code right here. I mean, it's the whole thing. This includes a bunch of user interface, UI abstractions. So you can see the code itself is an app, maybe less than 300 lines total. So this is just a really simple web app, and you can kind of look at it and how it works there. So with that, I'll just open the floor up. I do have maybe just 3 minutes for some questions. Do we have any questions over just, hey, basics of WebRTC? Okay, let's see, right here. So the question is it possible to record the calls? And the answer is yes, there are several ways to do it. So client side in your app, you can actually take that media stream and record it client side. Of course, that's not always optimal, but when it's peer-to-peer, there's no server in the middle. The other option is you can actually proxy the media through a server. So you can have the WebRTC basically connect to a server and have the server in the middle to record the calls. That's an excellent question. We had another question right here. How do I make money out of it? Right, so the idea is the value add is in your application, right? So there's probably a lot of, how do I make money out of it? That is a question for an entire another talk, but I'll give you my little 5-minute, my 30-second answer, and that is when you're building a game that people love to play, when you're building the real estate website that is providing value, when you're doing anything that's providing value, and then if you could communicate, right? If I could make that call go straight to the agent, isn't that better? Isn't that going to differentiate you as a real estate app over the competition? Absolutely. And getting on the front end of it and doing it now before it's ubiquitous and everybody does it is advantageous to you. So it's just like everything else. I would say providing real value to people, that's the way you use the technology to make money out of it. I'll do one more question right here.
I saw the demo work well, the Twitter thing you're working on. Application-aware firewalls, is that a problem with WebRTC now?
So the question is application-aware firewalls, is that a problem with WebRTC? That is perhaps maybe a question for some of the more advanced WebRTC talks. I would give you that I think no, and I will just, as a disclaimer, I don't know for sure. The reason being WebRTC is also actually encrypted end-to-end. And so if you have an encrypted stream, it should not even be... Right, yeah, so if you have some type of application-aware firewall, does that sound right to you, Lantre? Yeah, look at that. 1 for 1 for me. I love it. Well, thank you guys very much. I would encourage everyone to just stay right in this room because we have an excellent talk next with Mr. Corey McFadden. So I'm going to let him set up. Thank you. You guys have been an excellent audience.